let's go. It's time to be the GOAT. It's time to enter God mode, man, let's get it going. I wanna be the greatest, energy is overflowing. I know I'm stoking the fire, my desire's taking over, not time.
Okay, you beautiful friends, welcome back to the back of the semi-truck, and we are jumping into part 3 of this new series that I started recently called Learning the Lore, and we are covering the video game timeline of Sonic the Hedgehog. And a couple things here at the beginning, because of course I always do a little bit of an intro, but we are in the back of a semi-truck, so I am stopped somewhere tonight with this truck where it's raining outside. Really doubt y'all are going to be able to hear that background noise, but the outside world, it might creep in with the noise a little bit. The vehicles have been a little bit loud tonight, but not too bad. But I figured I'd throw that disclaimer out there ahead of time. And I do also want to know, is there a thing that Sonic fans are called? Because I know, you know, MLP has Bruni, RWBY fans are called Fandom. There's just various different things people are called in various different fandoms, so I figured I'd ask. Then, thirdly, I was kind of called out in the last video where Jay's Reviews was referring to something in his video, you know, Sonic Adventures 1 and 2, he was referring to it as SA, and unfortunately, with the vast array of videos that I watch, I couldn't help but hear something else, and I was kind of called out for that. And if I didn't mention it, they are correct that nobody else would have thought the same thing, because people are here for Sonic material. So, with that said, I'm sorry about that, but I don't filter myself. I just go ahead, whatever's in my head, I'll push that pause and say what I need to say and then continue. But, you know, it is what it is. I do apologize if y'all are around for part 2. But what we are in right now is part 3, or at least part 3 for me. This is the second video in Jay's Review series, and I will leave a link down below. And if you feel like Jay's Reviews got something wrong, leave it in the comments and correct him. And, you know, hey, interaction. I love it. So let's talk down in the comments. But nonetheless, one thing we need to do is go ahead and switch me from being on the big screen to up here in the, I believe, top left-hand corner. Whatever it is, put me on up there, and let's go ahead and start this. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say other than 3, 2, 1, and play.
The new age of Sonic was fully in gear, as all games going forward would be developed on all platforms. The ones at the time being Sony's PlayStation 2, Nintendo's GameCube, and the new Xbox from Microsoft. But we won't get into those games quite yet, as they also gave attention to Nintendo's handheld, the Game Boy Advance. The GBA was home to many games that replicated the gameplay that was popular in the early 90s.
Pause. Okay, so where we last left off was we only covered 2 video games in the last, you know, Learning the Lore number 2. And that was Sonic Adventures 1 and Sonic Adventures 2. And now we're going to be covering some more games here where it was Game Boy Advance, and we're not covering Sonic Heroes or nothing like that yet. Okay, so I figured I'd pause real fast and tell y'all where we last left off, because I think I am going to be putting a timestamp where we jump into this in the description or somewhere, I don't know. But either way, if y'all jump here, that's where we last left off. Either way, let's continue and play.
Mario, Zelda, and Metroid games going to show that already. But Sega put their hat in that ring with Sonic Advance, which first released on the GBA in late 2001. With this still being a timeline video, we'll just focus on this game's plot. In that regard, Advance was going all the way back to the days of Sonic 1, where you didn't really get much story at all. Something the series had earned the right to since, I mean, have you seen how long this video is just by summarizing the plots of Adventure 1 and Adventure 2? In this game, you pick Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, or Amy and play through several zones to stop Eggman from using the Chaos Emeralds to take over the world, and also free trapped animals from being turned into robots. Seriously, the same as Sonic 1, just only with more characters playable. The only thing in the game that counts as a story would be that at the end of Angel Island Zone, towards the end of the game, your selected character will battle Mecha Knuckles. Not to be confused with Metal Knuckles from Sonic R, though. The game just drops this guy in with little fanfare as you progress to the final stage. If you collect all the Chaos Emeralds, Sonic will go Super after the X Zone boss, and then progress to the Moon Zone for a true final boss fight.
Pause. Okay. So, I'm wondering if there isn't no storyline and it's just kind of rehashing gameplay from previous games, why are we really jumping into this one? That's what I'm wondering, but normally Jay's reviews kind of, does actually say why, but I don't know. I just felt a need to kind of pause and actually communicate that, because I'm kind of just sitting here like, if we're doing the timeline, let's just jump to where the story continues. But maybe he's got something, maybe he doesn't. Either way, let's continue and play.
Well, that's about it. So that might make it seem like placing the game on a timeline is simple, but it's actually that conversation where things get the most interesting for Advance, actually. The plot is nothing, but there's one detail that changes it from going right after SA2 to before. Remember how in Sonic Adventure 1, Sonic and Tails boarded the Tornado to chase after the egg carrier which got shot down? Tails then returned with the Tornado 2 that came with a battle mode. This detail is definitely something the games remembered, as the Tornado 2 returned in Sonic Adventure 2 as Tails' Mech Walker, but Sonic Advance shows the original red Tornado appearing exactly as it did in SA1, as Tails finds Sonic following the Moon Zone battle. Which means that Sonic Advance brings us backwards in the timeline and takes place between Sonic R and Sonic Adventure. It sounds so small, but it's there. And the Tornado 2 is shown in Sonic Advance 3, which means it shouldn't be taken as some kind of accident. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, doesn't Amy's inclusion throw a wrench into this placement of mine? Good question, hypothetical viewer. In Sonic Adventure 1, Amy says she hasn't seen Sonic in a while, reminiscing about the days of Sonic CD. Well, that's the thing. Advance having no cutscenes has got me thinking that every playthrough besides Sonic is a mere what-if scenario, like Tails is in Sonic 3. Sonic's is the only canon one, as he's the only character that goes to the Moon Zone. And even then, while Amy is shown in the ending here, she technically never sees Sonic here, so nothing with SA1 is contradicted. Especially since Sonic R showed that Amy still interacted with the regular cast from time to time, just was never outright included in adventures until Sonic Adventure, then becoming a regular member of the cast starting in Sonic Adventure 2. So with that said, I think I've covered my bases on why this game takes place before Sonic Adventure 1. Truly, it seems weird to put a game that came after SA1 had restructured the series before it on the timeline, but I think it makes sense.
Oh, okay. So, literally all he had to do, instead of saying all that, was just say that Amy proclaimed that she hasn't seen Sonic in a while. Literally, he didn't have to give no more explanation after that, because he could have used the excuse that she hasn't seen him in a while, and this was the adventures of previous past. So that's literally all he had to say to fit it in the timeline where he wants to fit it. I mean, for me, this is just one of those games that it is what it is. You can kind of literally just put it anywhere. If there is no story, it can go any flippin' where. I mean, granted, yes, he does bring up some good points about the plane, but at the same time, I mean, that's a little bit nitpicky in my opinion, so I don't know. If there's no story involved with the timeline, I really don't care about the game, but you know what? We're here for the lore, so let's be as accurate as possible. And like I've already said, if you feel like he's got something wrong, please let me know in the comments. Let's go ahead. I was about to do a countdown for some reason with 3, 2, 1, but we don't need to do that. Okay, really fast, if you wonder why I do this number here and say pause, unpause, I know I've said this in previous videos, but I work off a tablet, so I don't have screen recording like with a laptop and all that stuff. We're in the back of a semi-truck. So I got to give myself, when putting this all together, an indication on, where to pause and stop and start the video and stuff like that. So let's continue and play.
Now on that note, Sonic Advance got 2 sequels. Sonic Advance 2 is a game that also has minimal story, but 3 is a bit more complicated, so we'll return to it later. Advance 2 is largely the same stop Eggman from capturing animals routine, however, Advance 2 does have more meat on its bones than the first game. This game includes tiny cutscenes in Sonic's playthrough as we see him introduced to a new character, Cream the Rabbit, and her pet, Cheese the Chow. These two were created for their appearance in Sonic Heroes, the next main console game, but debuted earlier in Sonic Advance 2. Cream's mother, Vanilla, was captured by Eggman as Cream tried to save her herself, but was caught and saved by Sonic at the start of his story. Sonic also rescues Tails later in the story and then fights Knuckles, who was somehow tricked by Eggman into fighting Sonic yet again for little justification. I mean, at least in Triple Trouble we could just look to the fan remake to rewrite it, and then in Sonic Adventure 1, Knuckles fights Sonic not because he trusts anything Eggman had to say, but because Eggman gave him the idea that Sonic was looking for emeralds, and then he saw Sonic with one, thinking it was a Master Emerald piece, setting up Eggman to swoop in and steal it and feed it to Chaos. Here, no such justification for the Red Echidna. While it would be easy to say that Sonic's playthrough is once again the only canon run of Sonic Advance 2, as this game operates like the first game where Sonic uses the 7 emeralds to fight the true final boss, but then I noticed something. At the end of the game, Vanilla is recaptured by Eggman and then Sonic goes super to follow him into outer space and then saving Vanilla for real this time. However, Sonic never saved her in his main campaign. That only happened at the end of Cream's playthrough. So maybe you could disregard Tails and Knuckles as they have no bearing on this game past their cutscenes with Sonic, but in Cream's cutscene, she's frustrated that Sonic just tells her to stay put, so you could then say that Sonic and Cream's stories are both canon to the game. Not impossible, since Cheese the Chow is an impervious, boss-killing demigod, it seems, so I can buy into that. It's the only way to make sense of all the events here. Also, Amy is not a part of the story at all in Sonic Advance 2, as she gets unlocked as a playable character for fully completing the entire game, but that's it. And if we were to go with the idea that Amy wasn't a regular member of the crew until her campaign of Adventure 1, then that would be an easy reason to say that Sonic Advance 2 takes place after the first game and before Adventure 1. As for Advance 3, like I said, that game is different from the first two, so we can save it for later.
Balls. Okay, so literally all you're going to do is place it after Sonic Advance, the first one. So literally all you had to... Okay. I feel like I'm nitpicking here, but I feel like with this game, the Sonic Advance 1, 2, and 3, I feel like he didn't have to explain hardly anything and just tell us Sonic Advance 2, it introduced us to Vanilla. I think that's what he called her. I'm not 100% sure, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Advance 1, this happened. Okay. Amy said this and this, that explains where we are in this timeline. Sonic Advance 2 introduced us to this new character, so we'll just place this after that. Sonic Advance 3, I don't know where he's going with it, but I got a feeling he's going to place it after, like, Sonic Adventure 1 and 2. And I just feel like he's going to do it just for the sake of moving it somewhere else. But, let's find out what he does and just see where he goes with this. So, and play.
So instead, let's return to the main series and see what did happen following Adventure 2. Sonic Heroes released for the PS2, Xbox, GameCube, and PC.
Pause. Okay, so instead of us tackling Sonic Advance 3, we're going to move on to the main console games instead of the handhelds and place it after all these somehow in the timeline. So I can see where people get frustrated with Jay's Reviews timeline. And no, it's no knock against Jay's Reviews because, let's be honest, a video of these magnitudes take a lot of research. So kudos to him. This is his timeline and his opinion. So let's not knock him too much, but have a discussion about it more than anything. But yeah, okay, I'll have to wait and see where he puts Sonic Advance 3. I don't know anything after the classic era. So, all this stuff from Sonic Adventure and going forward, this is all new to me anyway. So, don't get me wrong, I've watched some, cartoons of it, but I haven't actually delved into it like I'm doing now. Either way, I'll shut up for a minute or two and
in 2003 in Japan and early 2004 for every other region. This game set up to do things differently from the adventure titles, as those games focused heavily on the story and revolving the gameplay around the story. Sonic Heroes was trying to be more like the old games. The playable roster was expanded to include 12 heroes, but they're divided into 4 teams of 3. Each of the 4 teams plays pretty much the exact same as one another and play the exact same stages in the exact same order. And even then, while each team has 3 characters, the gameplay is pretty much the Adventure Sonic gameplay, but with the gimmick that you trade from one character to another for specific tasks. Each team has a speed type character, a flight type character, and a power type character. The first time the Sonic series divided its cast into these categories, and will continue to do so in several games after this. While Heroes put the cutscenes firmly in the back seat compared to the adventure games, there's still a lot to go over here. The first campaign you'll probably try out is Team Sonics, consisting of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. Guess Tails and Knuckles are so used to this egomaniac by now, or else I'd imagine the name Team Sonic would have gotten vetoed. Their story begins with Tails and Knuckles finding Sonic to alert him that Dr. Eggman has sent out an ominous letter saying that he's going to conquer the world in just 3 days, and if they want to stop him, they better try it now. So they set out to do just that. This is the format that every team follows, a basic intro cutscene that establishes what the team is trying to do, and then in the levels you see them interact with one another. Team Rose consists of Amy, Cream, and Big, returning from SA1. Amy is trying to find Sonic like always, but things have gotten mysterious as Cheese's brother, Chocola Chow, was abducted, as was Froggy. A news clipping showing Sonic having taken them both.
Balls. Okay, that Froggy, he goes through it in these games, because I remember when What's-His-Face was introduced in his introduction, how that's literally his plot, was trying to chase down Froggy and recapture him. So holy crap, that Froggy's going through it. So I don't know, I figured I'd pause and just kind of speak through that for a moment and be like, holy crap. Yeah, so I like the idea of Sonic Heroes here, though. It seems like a good format for a game of having 4 distinct teams, and it just builds their character that much more, because they have, you know, I seen where over there on the right hand side where it was like Team Chaotix or something like that, but you get Team Sonic, Rose. It just adds more character to show them interacting with others more. So I like the format that game's going with. Either way, let's continue and play.
So Amy, Cream, and Big set out to rescue them and find what Sonic is up to. And Cheese is there too, but he doesn't count as a team member, I guess. Then you have Team Chaotix, consisting of Espio the Chameleon, Charmy Bee, and Vector the Crocodile. This is why I skipped over Knuckles' Chaotix in Part 1. These 3 characters debuted in that game, but when promoting Sonic Heroes, head of Sonic Team, Takashi Iizuka, claimed they weren't really bringing back the Chaotix as we knew them. Instead, they were taking the characters from the 32X game and rebooting them for the main series. The Chaotix not really having any goal or duty that was established in the 32X game, so the alternate continuity comics had to just make that part up back in the 90s. But Sonic Heroes, as I said, redesigned the team and turned the trio into a struggling detective agency that finally gets work as a mysterious client claims he's in dire need of their services and can pay handsomely, so they set out to do the job. Things get a little more complicated with Team Dark's story, which begins with Rouge the Bat infiltrating Eggman's base to find some secret treasure he's hiding.
Pause. Okay, so does that mean that you're disregarding the Chaotic game, or because this is their official introduction into the canonical series? Or, I mean, I feel like the game still should be floating somewhere in the timeline, because we're not touching on that game hardly at all. Because technically that is what introduced them, but if we're going with this being their introduction, I can kind of see that as well, but I would still like to hear more about the original game that they were a part of. But either way, we're paused here on Shadow, so let's see what Rouge, I think that's what her name is, I don't know. After driving all day, my mind sometimes is like, either way, let's continue and play.
And what she finds is Shadow the Hedgehog in stasis, having apparently survived his fall from Sonic Adventure 2. Originally, Shadow was supposed to stay dead following SA2, but he exploded in popularity after that game and people wanted more of him, so he came back in Sonic Heroes. However, Shadow can't remember anything that happened to him before now that brought him to this point. Shadow's pod was being guarded by E123 Omega, the final member of the E-Series robots. Eggman put Omega in charge of guarding Shadow, but feels this was a waste of his power, and he's now dead set on destroying the Eggman Empire. Rouge realizes this is the perfect alliance. She wants to find that treasure that the Doctor is hiding, Shadow needs to learn his past, and Omega wants to kill Eggman. So they can accomplish all 3 of these tasks together. What begins as an unlikely alliance becomes a powerful team of misfit friends that's still popular with fans to this very day. Team Dark's story has the most going on from level to level. First, Shadow wants to find out from Eggman why he was in that base and what happened, which Rouge decides not to just say for some.
Okay, so yeah, I'm pausing right there real fast. So far, actually not so far, because now we've gotten all 4 teams explained to us. I don't think it's going to be much of a surprise, but my favorite team as of now, Team Dark. Because, obviously, they seem to have, I don't know, there's villains. So, we got the robot who's like, screw it. I ain't, you're not using me for my potential. I'm going to just destroy you. And then we got, Shadow, of course. He's trying to figure out, okay, I can't remember nothing again. What the heck? He's got his past. I like Shadow. I've learned a lot about him doing this series. Awesome character. Awesome story behind him. And, of course, you got Rouge. I mean, she's just who she is, so I like her. Put them all together. Team Dark. Awesome. Love it. Let's continue and play.
Reason. But then, 4 zones in, you see all these capsules that are like the ones Shadow was found in at the start. The cutscene at the end shows that robotic shadows are being mass-produced, something confirmed by the end of the story. This Shadow not knowing if he's the real deal or a fake. Something still not said by the end of the game, being the first time a Sonic game had ended with an unresolved plot thread that later games could expand upon. Sonic Heroes' more laid-back approach to storytelling does lead to some massive missed opportunities, as Team Sonic, for example, doesn't have much of a reaction to Shadow still being alive. It's just like, oh hey, it's Shadow! Anyway, this is also the beginning of the games forcing really contrived situations that cause characters to fight each other, because the idea of character battles came before the justification for them in this game. Like when Team Rose finds Team Sonic and Amy's all like, well, time for us to get married, Sonic, and he's like, well, guess I'm gonna have to throw you off this building now.
Marriage? No way!
Pause. Okay, so that should be a reaction. Well, I don't know about the whole fighting, pushing someone off a building, but I mean, Amy, if I'm judging by some of the cartoons that I've seen, she is a bit pushy when it comes to relationships, so she needs to chill a little bit when it comes to all this. So I'm with Sonic. Let's go ahead and have this little battle sequence, because marriage, bump you a little too pushy for me. And yeah, I mean, as far as the no reaction from Team Sonic about Shadow, I mean, let's be real. It's just the reaction. It's a video game. It doesn't have to have like over-exaggerated, oh my gosh, type of reactions, like, oh gosh, I'm so glad you're alive type deal. I mean, but, going back though, all the robot versions of Shadow, and then Shadow not knowing if he's a real version, this and that, I'm sure Shadow figured out real fast that he can bleed, so I'm sure he knows that he's not a robot or nothing. But either way, I better continue. I did tell my wife that I will be done at a certain time of recording tonight, so this might actually be a little shorter than most of them, but more than likely me saying that this one's going to be shorter will make this one be the longest part. But I don't know. We'll find out by the time I'm done. Let's continue and play.
But still, Heroes manages to work in a lot of the franchise's lore when you get towards the end of the game. 4 zones in, it's revealed to the audience that they aren't actually fighting Eggman in this, but instead Metal Sonic in disguise. He hasn't really done anything besides cameo since Sonic CD, but he's back and he really means business in this one with his new form, Neo Metal Sonic, and with an ability to shapeshift into other people. And produce clones of himself to battle all the teams at once, I think, absorbing the data of Team Sonic at the end of Zone 4.
All life form data successfully copied.
Pause, okay, yeah. That's awesome. Eggman ain't even the main villain. It's just Neo Metal Sonic or whatever. Metal Sonic. It's just pretending to be Eggman and then doing his thing. Evil for evil's sake. I like it. It's awesome. Plus, at a certain point, you kind of get tired of, Eggman being the main villain all the time, and it gets repetitive. So this is a nice change of pace. I like the fact that there's a main villain other than just Eggman all the time. So either way, hopefully I'll have this part 3 out close to when I might actually have part 4 out by then. Right now for me, I think it's December 11th. I might actually be able to have part 4 out as well. Either way though, hopefully by the time the new movie comes out, Sonic 3, hopefully I can have all this out at the same time. But yeah, that's a good change of pace. I like the idea of bringing, Metal Sonic back. So let's continue and play.
He pretended to be Sonic to capture Chocola and Froggy, and the reason can be heard in the ending of Team Rose's story.
Chaos data has been copied.
Metal Sonic needed that Chao and Froggy because they contain remnant data of Chaos. The Chao because Chaos was himself a mutated Chao, and Froggy because Chaos had absorbed him back in SA1. And by happenstance, Metal Sonic was also able to nab the powers of the Ultimate Lifeform in Team Dark's story.
Ultimate Lifeform data has been copied.
At the end of Team Chaotix's playthrough, it's revealed that their mystery client was Dr. Eggman, who sent the message out for their help because Metal Sonic, after spending game after game on the sidelines, had crafted his master plan to destroy Sonic and crew once and for all and take over the world himself, tossing his former master in jail while he did it. Team Chaotix otherwise had nothing to do with the story, which is why Metal Sonic didn't scan any of their data throughout their playthrough. The Doctor doesn't get a chance to explain any of that until after the Chaotix beat the crap out of him for not having the money they were promised.
As soon as I conquer the world, I will pay you!
Balls. Okay. First, that's pretty funny that he's going to end up getting beat up because he can't pay them. But that seems like pretty good storytelling, honestly, that Metal Sonic couldn't copy their data because they were off on their own thing, but it's kind of confusing that, well, it's not confusing. I ain't even going to finish that thought because now that I'm thinking about it, Eggman has to always be involved, just like Shredder has to always be involved with something to do with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So, yeah, it all makes sense when I slow down long enough to think about it. So, yeah, okay. I was going to say how confusing it is to have Eggman be over here and doing his thing like this, and then we have, Metal Sonic pretending to be Eggman. But, yeah, it makes sense in all reality because Metal Sonic's like, screw you, I want to take over the world, and then he just locks him away, and, yeah. Okay, but let's continue and watch Eggman get beat up by the Chaotix, and like,
Some nerve promising what you ain't got. We've been had. Just wait a minute. Just listen to me.
Take this, you bad man!
Figured I'd play that because I thought it was funny. As I was saying, Metal Sonic has assembled all this data from Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Chaos, and Shadow to become the Metal Overlord, a giant abomination that has enough power to destroy the world several times over. The only hope the characters have is with the Chaos Emeralds, like always. In order to reach the last story of Sonic Heroes, you need to complete all 4 team campaigns and need to collect the 7 emeralds in the special stages. You can do this as any team, Team Rose stages being the shortest, so it's the easiest to get the special stages as them. But for this run, I figured I'd do something interesting and new. In the final cutscene before battling Metal Sonic, each team has different emeralds, but they have all 7 combined. I looked at this and decided to find out what special stages were completed in canon by what teams, since this is a timeline video after all. Here were the results. Team Sonic has the blue emerald, Team Dark...
Pause. Okay. I'm just going to go ahead and say that this part feels like it's going to be a bit tedious to say, well, okay, see, look, here's the timeline of when they collected each emerald, and it's like, okay, let's just chill and just move on to the next thing. This part's just... I like going into this much detail, but at the same time, it's kind of like, okay, let's just move on. But it's okay. We're here for the lore, and let's continue with the lore, because I know just as soon as I complain about something, that's when something interesting is going to be happening. So let me shut up. I know I pause a lot, but there is also the link down below for you to go listen to Jay's reviews without all my pausing and stopping, because this is commentary, so, it is what it is. So, it's expected for me to pause from time to time. I don't know. I'm just running my mouth now. 3, 2, 1, and...
has the green and silver ones, Team Rose has the yellow and purple ones, and Chaotix has the teal and red ones. So if you wanted to do a canon playthrough of Sonic Heroes, you need to do special stages 1 and 4 as Team Dark, stage 2 as Team Sonic, 3 and 6 for Rose, and 5 and 7 for Chaotix. Thought that would be an interesting detail to point out for him.
Okay, I'll pause it again and say, you know what? Now that he explained it, which I should have gave him the time to do that, it makes sense for anyone who's wanting to play through the game in the order that things happen. So, I get it now. I get it. So, alright. That's a good added detail now that I heard him. So, let's continue.
anyone curious. Back to the story, I find Metal Sonic pretty interesting in this one, having not had any characterization beyond being cold and lifeless in Sonic CD. Now that he has dialogue, we hear his motivations. He did all this because Metal Sonic was built in the image of Sonic, but after being beaten so easily in Sonic CD, he's become afraid in a way of being nothing but an inferior robot copy of Sonic, overthrowing his master and trying to take over the world to settle it forever.
Sonic, I was created for the sole purpose of destroying you. But I can never seem to defeat you. That is why I transform my own body with my own hands.
You actually thought you could defeat me by transforming into a monster?
But that was the past. Now you're nothing but a speck of dust to me. See me as I am, no longer afraid of anything.
But as the game claims through cheesy dialogue, Metal Sonic might have copied all that data, but what he could never copy was the power of these 12 characters teaming up and battling him all at once, as Sonic turns super once more alongside super-powered Tails and Knuckles, who don't get new forms to show it, but they defeat Metal Sonic's new...
Pause. Okay, that's just stupid. If Sonic's going to be able to change his form, let Tails and Knuckles change their form as well. Come on, game. I mean, I get it. You put a little shield around them, like, oh, okay, cool, you know, they're super now. Yeah, let them turn gold as well. I mean, come on, do something special for the game. But that's more data that they gotta enter into the, you know, programming, but whatever. Either way, but I like that the voice that we get for Metal Sonic as well seems more like a really roboticized voice of Dr. Robotnik / Eggman. So we still get the Eggman aspects of, you know, that Eggman put within Metal Sonic. So hopefully that made sense as it came out of me. So either way, I know I gotta continue and
form once and for all just the same. Metal Sonic reverts back to his base form, not sure why he can't beat Sonic, and it's like I said, he just didn't have the teamwork that the whole game was based around at his side. As the characters one by one start to depart with the day clearly saved. Except for the Chaotix, they still want that paycheck.
Guess that's it for this case.
Guess so.
But what about our money?
Man, I almost forgot. That slime ball!
All right! Our next adventure awaits us, so there's no time to waste. Yeah! We're Sonic Heroes!
Which ends Sonic Heroes. As mentioned, not a super complex story compared to the adventure games, but I feel they injected just the right amount of lore and character moments that still make it feel like the next step for the series taking place after Sonic Adventure 2, even if it's not as grand or game-changing. So from here, there are a couple of...
Balls. Okay, I feel like that it was a pretty big game, though. I mean, you say that it packed just enough for the storytelling and lore, but it feels like it packed quite a bit. We get more characterization for Metal Sonic. We get a little bit more goofy side to Eggman. We get introduced, technically, I guess this is the introduction because they, you know, they're reintroducing the Chaotix. So we get that introduction. I mean, and plus they're there for also comedic relief as well. So we get a lot within Sonic Heroes. And did it introduce? I think he did say it introduces the aspect that, you know, there's 4 teams and they're teams of 3 and you got to play through each of the. I feel like that. I think it added a lot personally, but you know, that's just me on the outside looking into this world of Sonic video games. So either way, I'm shutting up and we're continuing and
different routes to explore. Sonic Battle released the same day as Sonic Heroes in the West. Sonic Advance 3 released a few months later, but the next main game was one called Shadow the Hedgehog. Which one shall we discuss first? Well, I'm going to go over Shadow the Hedgehog.
let's do it.
Those not in the know might find themselves wondering how the game following the lighthearted and cheesy Sonic Heroes wound up being this, and that's pretty simple. The early 2000s saw a massive shift in the gaming industry where mature games are the most popular ones now. Sonic Team, in what I'd say their first thoroughly transparent attempt at replicating some popular format that worked for other significantly better games, released Shadow the Hedgehog in 2005 for PS2, Xbox, and GameCube. Sonic himself might not be the best fit for a game that's gimmick was going all hardcore, so why not take the popularity of Shadow and use that as a springboard for that idea? If that intro didn't give it away, Shadow the Hedgehog is not a game I hold in high esteem. Despite the fact that it was the first 3D Sonic game I ever played, it is not a game I enjoy playing now because of all the reasons I mentioned in my review of it from 2020. It doesn't control well, its structure is the most repetitive of all the 3D Sonic games, and the writing is laughably try-hard and nonsensical at the same time.
A Chaos Emerald? You've got to be kidding me, guys. This is like taking candy from a baby, which is fine by me.
Okay, I have to pause it right there. Okay, I'm kind of starting to agree with him, where it's kind of like, okay, maybe this wasn't the best outing. In my head, I'm thinking, oh, from what I know about, if I get the words out of my mouth, again, driving all day, it's raining outside, I had to deal with the rain and driving. My brain just doesn't function like it should. But learning what I know about Shadow, and him being one of, obviously, like everybody else, a favorite character, I was thinking, okay, this game's probably going to be pretty decent, add some lore, but hearing some of the dialogue just then, I'm kind of like, oh, that line was not a very good line. And, it's like taking candy from a baby, which I'm okay with. Like, okay, you're just trying to be bad for bad's sake, but okay, I get it. I don't know, maybe y'all liked, Shadow the Hedgehog, or Shadow the game, or whatever they were calling this, but I don't know, it doesn't feel like something I would want to play either. See, some people in the first video said that they didn't care for Jay's reviews timeline, but I don't see nothing wrong with it yet. I mean, he seems to be doing his due diligence and, going over these games in great detail, but yeah, it is what it is. Everyone's got their opinion, so let's continue this, though. We've got roughly 12 minutes left of this. Let's see if we can power through this fairly quickly. And play.
Side note, this was also the first major English recast in the games. Shadow the Hedgehog brings in the voices from the Sonic X show for each character, replacing the entire cast that debuted in Sonic Adventure. You get used to it after a while. However, none of that matters for this video because something doesn't have to be good to be a canon part of the saga, so what was Shadow the Hedgehog all about? Well, as you recall, Sonic Heroes ended with it still being a mystery as to whether or not Shadow was the real Shadow from Adventure 2 or a robotic copy of him. I think there's plenty of evidence in Heroes that supported him being the real deal. For one, his personality was intact when bantering with Rouge and Omega, and even Sonic despite his fractured memory.
I might as well go look for that Master Emerald, since that irritating echidna is here.
Okay.
Something.
Pause again. It's pretty simple to find out if you're the real deal or not the real deal. If you're bleeding, I'm pretty sure you're not a robotic version of Shadow. So you get hurt. I mean, you're in battles, you're going to bleed a little bit because you get scrapes and bumps and bruises. But whatever. Video game logic, I know. Shut up, Billy. Quit thinking too much about it. Let's continue. Play.
Never change, do they?
What are you saying?
And Eggman also thought it was important enough to leave a robot as powerful as Omega to guard this Shadow, separate from all those other clones being mass-produced. But regardless, the Shadow game arrived a year later to answer all the questions, but in a bizarre fashion. Shadow was pretty clearly a good person at heart, just very misguided in SA2 for reasons I went into. Sonic Heroes showing that he's not evil at all. Shadow the Hedgehog, the game, used the fact that Shadow is mostly known as an anti-hero combined with his amnesia to tell this story that was marketed around choosing whether or not Shadow was going to be a hero, a villain, or neither. Which I just find to be a misuse of his character, but here's how it goes. Every playthrough of Shadow begins at the level Westopolis, where an army of evil aliens called the Black Arms have invaded the Earth, and their leader, Black Doom, claims to know who Shadow is and that he owes them the Chaos Emeralds. In the stage, Shadow must either help Black Doom wipe out the gun troops, find the Chaos Emerald for himself, or help Sonic fend off the Black Arms. Doing one of these three things will take you to a different stage where the story plays out completely differently depending on what you do as you eventually reach one of the 6 final levels where you have to definitively pick a hero mission or a dark mission where you get one of 2 endings from that stage, creating a total of 10 possible endings. Writing it out like that sounds pretty cool, but in practice, the issue with Shadow is that the writing just isn't there to back any of it up. Each stage feels separate and disconnected from what choices you've made before, creating a very disjointed plot where it's impossible to see all the major events in one playthrough, but then all the major events are canon at the same time. meaning that I can't really tell you what the most canon path of Shadow is, as there really isn't one, but I'll go over what important bullet points are contained within the campaign.
Pause. Okay. So honestly, all that mess that he was complaining about just then, actually, it goes together well with Shadow, because as disjointed as his story is, so is his memories. So when he's got a disjointed story, it just makes it feel like, for the person playing it, that they feel like Shadow as well. I know I'm thinking way too much about this, but that makes them where they feel just as disjointed as Shadow, and puts them in the shoes of Shadow. So I feel like that's actually a pretty good detail. It might have been accidental and actually a bad thing to do it that way in retrospect, but it kind of adds to the whole disjointedness of who Shadow is as a person himself. So looking back, as the outsider that I am, my gosh, y'all are going to start thinking I'm drunk when I'm doing these videos with how much I slur my words. Either way though, with the outsider that I am being coming into this lore, I find that to be an interesting detail. But let's let him explain all this real fast, and we're going to continue and play.
Of Shadow the Hedgehog. I already mentioned that Black Doom knows who Shadow is and has a past with him that even the audience is not aware of. But then you have this newly introduced commander of Gun who has a vendetta against Shadow for a mysterious reason that isn't revealed until you reach the stage Cosmic Fall, where he corners Shadow at the Ark, revealing that he was once friends with Maria before she died. Her death being the only concrete thing Shadow can remember at this point. The commander, who's not given a name in the game, reveals that he witnessed Professor Gerald creating Shadow with the aid of Black Doom, whose alien blood was exactly what the professor needed in order to give Shadow the immortality I mentioned before. The commander blames Shadow's existence for Gun's raid on the Ark and the death of Maria. Besides that, the story is filled with all kinds of bits and pieces that become relevant at some point or another, like how Black Doom informed Shadow at the stages Glyphic Canyon and Sky Troops that their floating fortress was planted on Earth as a temple grounds thousands of years ago to be risen when they eventually came back to invade Earth, and that they reside in an asteroid-looking thing called the Black Comet, which passes by the Earth every 50 years. I'm not sure why now was the right time to invade, but still, here we are. Also, Eggman tells Shadow at some point that he's a robot fake, not the real Shadow. I say that nonchalantly because it's all null and void. With the different pathways and 10 total endings, there are in fact 326 possible combinations for how to get from the start of the game to these 10 endings, and most of them are disjointed nonsense. But we don't have to worry about that, because getting all 10 endings of Shadow unlocks a fully canon last story mode, where it turns out that none of the possible endings happened at all and were merely what-if scenarios. Because this last story segment begins after Shadow has collected all 7 Chaos Emeralds in the hopes of using...
Okay, so pause right there. Okay, so that's a good thing to make everything coalesce together, and adds to what I was saying earlier about the disjointedness. So yes, doing everything and all together unlocks the last one, which is the biggest plot point of it all, and let's say pretty much the biggest canonized event of the whole thing. All the rest is null and void, like you said. So yeah. And then on top of that, the story has such a different feel to it, because we got this little alien guy. Well, he's not little, but we got this alien guy here, and it just kind of doesn't feel like a story that should have been told for a Sonic universe. But maybe that's just because I'm an outsider jumping into this lore. I don't know, but Shadow's now all of a sudden making me feel like he's this kind of character who would work well as an anti-hero / tragic backstory character that you can enjoy within the game that he was meant to be in, but as a solo character, kind of like Joey from Friends. He's great in the show, but when you put him solo, it doesn't work quite as well. But I don't know. I'm sure this game's got some love out there for it. Either way, let's continue and play.
Using them to regain his memories, where Black Doom then uses them for his final plan, using Chaos Control to warp the Black Comet down to the surface of the Earth and begin harvesting humans for the continued survival of the Black Arms. Apparently, Professor Gerald had partnered with Black Doom for Project Shadow, and in exchange, Shadow would gather the 7 emeralds to help Black Doom with this part of the plan. But Gerald was actually a good person back then, so he had a backup plan. Throughout the campaign, Shadow will see the Chaotix up to something they refuse to disclose, and in the last story, it's revealed by the Chaotix that Gerald's plan to deal with the Black Arms was that Shadow would, when the time came, use the Eclipse Cannon on the Ark to destroy the Black Comet before the Black Arms could take over the Earth. Then, Project Shadow led to the raid, Gerald went insane and created his own plan to destroy the Earth, Black Doom be damned, I guess. Shadow, fueled by his now remembering Maria's wish for him to give hope to humanity, becomes Super Shadow to battle against Black Doom's final form, Devil Doom, to save the Earth, minutes before the Earth is overrun by the Black Arms, while the rest of the cast roots for him from below. The biggest slap in the face of all is that this boss fight takes like 4 minutes max, but the developers snuck in the biggest detail of the whole game for players who wait until the 9-minute mark. At that moment, Eggman will chime in and say this.
Shadow, can you hear me? This might be the last chance I have to speak to you, so what I said about having created you, it was all a lie. Everyone thought you died during that horrible incident, but I rescued you with one of my robots. You lost your memory, that's all. You really are the ultimate life form my grandfather created.
Yeah, this Shadow is the real one from SA2, not a cheap fake. I don't know why they took such an important detail so far out of most players' reach, but here we are. Once the final battle is beaten, Super Shadow uses Chaos Control to bring the comet back to outer space, where the Eclipse Cannon is used to blow it to smithereens as people all over the world rejoice. With the truth about Gerald's plan to destroy the comet and the true, peaceful intentions behind Shadow being broadcast to the entire world, Professor Gerald's legacy is rewritten as someone who was dealt an extremely bad hand by Gun, and so the President pledges alongside the Gun Commander to try and right the wrongs of the past and make peace with Shadow. Someone who has fully regained his memories, content with everything, knowing that he'll continue to uphold Maria's wish of protecting the Earth at all costs, ending Shadow the Hedgehog. Honestly, when reflecting on it, the story doesn't even sound that bad, especially with how it tried to fill in the blanks of the series, like why the Eclipse Cannon even exists at all, giving them a firm direction to take Shadow's character in for future games. However, that's just me presenting the clip.
And pause. Okay, so I know he's kind of going into detail more of how he feels about the game and saying it sounds good when you break it down like that, and this is the Cliff Notes version, but that's all I want. So this works for me, that I'm not going to play the game per se. Maybe I will one day. I don't know. Really doubt it, honestly. But the Cliff Notes version works for me because I get all the story of Shadow. And it's a really good story for the most part. Do I feel like Shadow would work in a game just by himself? Not necessarily. But at the same time, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. But I have to play the game in order to figure that out for myself. But nonetheless, though, the story is a good story. Shadow, and it ends on a good note. That's the most important thing. Shadow has his memories, and he's just happy to continue living out Maria's dream and protecting Earth. So where we go from here, I have no idea, but we got roughly 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27. It says 5 minutes, but I think this is the end to part 2. No, this might be the middle of his video. I don't know. Either way, though, I got it where it's, hopefully I've got this like I did the first part. I don't know. Hopefully I got it where it ends at a decent spot in it. So I'm going to continue and possibly let it play for more than a minute or two here, because like I said, my wife, I did tell her a certain amount of time, and here I am still sitting here going through this. Either way, continue.
Notes version of the story. You still have to do 10 playthroughs of Shadow, marred by things that don't make sense, are hardly connected, and more often than not, do things for pure shock value in the hopes of looking more mature than it actually is. However, like I said, I suppose that doesn't matter when looking at it through the lens of canonicity, but it's worth mentioning how I think this game is not very good. It could have worked with a lot of these ideas, but in execution it just feels like fanfiction. But we'll place it on the timeline right after Sonic Heroes. I mentioned before that on the same day that Sonic Heroes released, fans were treated to Sonic Battle on the Game Boy Advance. This is another game I'm not very fond of. Sonic definitely has the character roster to support a fighting game, even by 2004, however the problem is that it was a fighting game on the Game Boy Advance, which only had 4 buttons, really holding back the potential of the combat quite a lot. If that was the worst of it, I wouldn't complain too much, but this game might be the most bloated Sonic game to ever exist, including a full storyline for Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy...
Pause. Okay, so I thought, what? No, I don't know which one's worse, idea-wise. idea-wise, I don't know about story, I don't know none of that stuff, but idea-wise, I don't know what's worse. Sonic R, where you got the character racing a track with no vehicle, just running, or Sonic Battle, where it's a fighting game on a handheld. So are you hooking up to the internet, fighting other people? Doesn't make that much sense, but it is what it is. Let's continue this and play
Rouge, Cream, and Shadow, plus a final story, packed full of dialogue and repetitive battles that last an eternity and oftentimes feel like they were designed to bottleneck players. But at least in this game's case, the story is actually pretty good. No joke, I genuinely think the GBA Sonic fighting game has a cool story. It begins with Dr. Eggman trying to control a new mech. This one he read about in Professor Gerald's diary, and it's called a Gizoid, but since it doesn't respond to anything, the Doctor, in his infinite wisdom, just tosses the Gizoid into the ocean as it washes on shore for Sonic to find. Sonic and friends learn that the Gizoid starts out as a complete blank slate, but if you insert Chaos Emeralds into it, then he'll grow in consciousness and strength, developing a full personality after just a couple of them. They call him Emerald because he's powered by Chaos Emeralds. One of Emerald's strongest abilities is how he can see the actions and behaviors of others and copy them perfectly, which translates to the game as you can mix and match the light and heavy combo attacks of other characters to transform Emerald into the strongest character in the game, picking only the best and most powerful moves from the rest of the cast. Emerald is the main character of Sonic Battle, it's just that his story is seen through the perspective of all the other characters, as Emerald forms bonds with each and every single one. Like how he pokes fun at Knuckles, since that's what he sees Sonic doing, or how he protects Cream from these mass-produced Gamma robots, and she, in turn, does the same for him. Shadow and Rouge want to get a hold of Emerald so they can destroy him. The two of them know and reveal to the rest of the cast that the Gizoid was a robot meant for destruction and war, and that's why he should be shut down. This leads to a lot of good moments, like when Sonic reminds Shadow that his purpose was once to destroy, and look at him now. Eventually, Shadow learns to trust Emerald enough to give him his Chaos Emerald, the last one Emerald needs to reach max power. In the end, Eggman gains the upper hand on his new Death Egg, as his plan was to use its energy to overload Emerald and awaken his true destructive power. Which leads to a bittersweet final boss as Sonic has to fight against the overpowered Emerald you spent the whole game building up, activating Gerald's failsafe for weapons where if they go out of control they'll self-destruct, leaving the cast in mourning over the loss of Emerald, someone they regarded as a true friend before Eggman tampered with him. And unlike Shadow, Emerald was never revived, leaving his story to Sonic Battle, which is something people fondly remember about this game. Now, as for the
Okay, so pause, of course, there too again. That's actually a really good story. I thought I was going to disagree with the story at first, but it was unique with the way they told it. Like you said, it wasn't told through the robot's perspective, but it was told through everybody else's perspective of seeing him. And then, you know, it was a good story in general where you're powering this robot up, and then you have to... You're friends with this robot, and then you have to kill the robot. You're pretty much killing your friend. Oh my gosh, that's a good story. That is. Continue.
Canon discussion, it largely revolves around Shadow. His appearance at all is obviously why it's after Heroes, as is a mention of Omega at one point. But then, I don't know if this was just a mistake someone made when writing this game, but Shadow in Sonic Battle remembers everything about Maria and the Professor and what happened in Adventure 2. So for that reason, it would have to go after Shadow the Hedgehog, where the amnesia plot is resolved. Although it's now worth mentioning that it is later explained in the game Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood that the Gizoids were also a product of the ancient Echidna clan. This would explain why Gerald even researched Gizoids, because he was a researcher of Echidna lore. However, one of the hard lines actually drawn by the Sonic Encyclopedia book is that Sega officially considers the Dark Brotherhood as non-canonical. It was an RPG developed by BioWare for the DS back in 2008, but this game presented a big legal problem for Sega as one of the former Sonic comic writers got the usage of Echidna characters outside of ones already existing in the games to be his copyrighted material and felt the Dark Brotherhood infringed upon it and then sued, and this ended in a stalemate. And with the statute of limitations expired, the only way to reopen the case would be if Sega ever used things from Sonic Chronicles again, and so the Dark Brotherhood is now a game Sega would like you to forget. Fine by me, it ended on a cliffhanger anyway, which is not something I reward in a story, as you'll see later in this timeline series.
I'll pause it right there real fast because we only got a minute and a half left of this, and say, I don't know how I feel about that. I wish an RPG game of Sonic sounds like an interesting idea, kind of like Mario Brothers had that RPG with the 1,000-Year Door, but at the same time, it's kind of like, if it's not part of the canon, then who cares? You should have just put it in there and said, hey, this game excluded this reason, let's move on. But whatever. I'm going to let this play out the rest of the way, then I'm going to kind of, I might say a few things as it's playing, But I'm going to then go ahead and say a couple minutes on my afterthoughts and all that good stuff, and then I'll meet y'all in part 4. Either way, let's continue and
I'm spending this time on the Dark Brotherhood now during the Sonic Battle segment because it's the only natural point to mention that little bit about Gizoid lore. I'd like to believe that info about Gizoids and Echidnas can still be headcanoned even if that game has been thoroughly disowned. Moving right along, we finally have reached Sonic Advance 3. This is another one of the earliest Sonic games I played, and it's still one of my favorites to this day. Removing the multiple character campaigns from previous Advance games, and instead doing one larger campaign where you pick what characters you want to play in teams of 2, getting to play as Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Cream. One character being the one you play as, and the other one being your support character who you can call upon for tag actions. It was a lot of fun and created a lot of room for experimentation and replay value. The plot for this one's still pretty simple, being a game focused on the gameplay, but it does have some lore ties. Eggman uses Chaos Control to turn the world into 7 pockets of reality, and it's up to Sonic and friends to gather the emeralds and turn things back to normal. All that's pretty standard fare, but what's new is Eggman's latest robotic companion. In Sonic Battle, Eggman had already tried creating duplicates of Emerald that weren't as good as the real thing, but here he's perfected the technology, pitting Sonic and crew against Gemerald, who can merge with machinery, like Eggman's boss mechs seen throughout the game. But it seems like Eggman can't catch a break from robots turning on him as Gemerald steals the Chaos Emeralds at the altar of the Master Emerald and uses them to reach his ultimate form, Sonic then becoming Super Sonic and directly teaming up with Dr. Eggman to defeat Gemerald, and we get a pretty cute resolution to the Emerald storyline in the ending, as we see that Gemerald was later recovered by Cream, who brought him to Tails so they could reprogram him to become something like the robot they once knew, and that's exactly what happens. Gemerald is never seen again in the games past Sonic Advance 3, but I think it was really cool how this game had played off the storyline of Sonic Battle, giving that a bit of closure as they made the final Sonic platformer for the GBA.
Unfortunately, that wasn't a good stopping point, so what I'm going to do is just add that last, minute and a half to the next, and replay that, for me, so that I can get a refresher course on that minute and a half that was already just played. But that means we could just start the next video and play that minute and a half, and I'll be able to just kind of comment over top of it. But nonetheless, though, I know that was a bad stopping point, but like I said, I know I'm repeating myself. I'll add that back into the next part that we do together, and then that'll be the last one to part 2 of Jay's reviews video. And that one I know will end on a decent note, and then we could jump into his part 3, and that's probably going to be another 3-parter video from me as well, but that's going to be an extensive amount of jumping and learning the lore of Sonic the Hedgehog, and who knows, maybe I can do Sonic the Hedgehog lore for, something like the comic books or the show or something. I don't know, but this is my quick afterthoughts of, I've been sitting here for like an hour. My knee is hurting sitting here like this, honestly. So really, really fast, within a minute or 2, because I gotta call the wife. She told me she wants to go to bed at 9:30 no matter what, and it's 9:23 right now, so I kind of got to get off of here. Nonetheless, though, good lore. I actually love the story of Shadow. The further I get out of it and start thinking about it, the more I like the lore of Shadow, and how, he's just so many different aspects. I like the gameplay. I like the thought of the gameplay. Would it get tedious to play the game? I would absolutely hate the tediousness. I know I can't say the word right now. I would hate that, though, having to play it gosh, I can't get words out of my mouth. I would hate to have to play it umpteen million times just to get all those endings. So that would be tedious for that. And I'm glad I have all the lore for it through this, so I don't have to do that. I like the aspect that it creates a jumbled mess in your head, though. Kind of like, that's how Shadow feels in his head, is a jumbled mess, and that puts you in the same position as Shadow. So that's an interesting aspect. I do like that. At the same time, it sucks to play it if you have to do that. Either way, though, I don't know what to say from here. So for me, I know 100% I've got to get off of here. I've got to stop recording. As much as I want to continue to run my mouth and talk about it and all that stuff, got to get off of here. So here's the ending, And same thing I say to every video that I do, hit that like, tickle to subscribe, don't be texting and driving, watch what you love what you watch, and take it away, Mr. Rogers.
I like you just the way you are.